Thank you for the warm welcome, and thank you for having me in the first place. It's an honor to moderate this panel, even more so as I'm a man. But I would, no joking here, really not. I would like to introduce to you my three excellent panelists with whom I'm delighted to discuss for the next 45 minutes here on stage. And of course, just to say that now already we are very open, and we will be taking your questions also later during the discussion. So please prepare some. I will then call on you, and whoever has a question, just raise your hands, and we'll have a microphone being passed around, right, Virginie? Yeah, voilà. So please welcome with me Barrett, who is a vice chair of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, and also a senior advisor. And also a senior advisor at the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, a scientist and a science communicator. And I'm very thrilled to have you here and talk about climate change and the gender perspective on climate change. It is my pleasure to also welcome Claudia Belli, who is the head of Advocacy and Microfinance at BNP Paribas. So Claudia heads the relations with civil society, actually, at BNP Paribas from the private sector, and will bring this dimension and this experience to the discussion here. And last but not least, we welcome Bianca Pitt, who is a co-founder of She Changes Climate. Bianca, hello. An advisor to the environmental charity sector, an activist herself, a campaigner, and an environmental funder who actually got mad about the lack of representation of women in climate. And not only did you get mad about it, you also did something about it, and that is also something we would like to talk about now in the next 40 minutes or so. I would like to briefly ask you, and to start by asking you, we have heard the two, yes, please take a microphone. We have heard the call to action on the topic that we are discussing here. So gender mainstreaming the whole debate, and making sure that women are included in green finances and the green economy. So basically on two dimensions, one about the impact of climate change on women, and the other one about participation, or possible participation, in what could become a huge economic success story even. Is that a short question, a quick round of to all three of you? Is that are those two the top priorities that you would see and then you could share, or is there more that you would like to see in a call to action to G7 leaders who are meeting this weekend, starting on Sunday, actually in Bavaria? Oh, maybe you go first.
Well, hi everyone. Happy to be here with you. I think they are the two right ones. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, women are among the most vulnerable in society. I'm very happy that over the years in the IPCC reports, we've branched out to talking about more than what's happening with the physical science of the Earth system. We're talking about what's happening socially, and women are play such a pivotal role, both because they are often in vulnerable, activities, whether they're, doing agriculture or bringing water or caring for elders or caring for children. There's so much. They are on the forefront of vulnerability. But also, I think as we think about a green economy, in my job at NOAA, we also talk about the blue economy, so the ocean-based kind of changes that we hope to see. There's a tremendous opportunity for women to bring their skills, to bring their collaborative skills as well, and leadership into the space. So I think they are right.
Claudia, what do you think? I just want to hear from all of you.
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me here. Yes, I think it's of course a very important point, and I was thinking, so it's beyond BNP Paribas, it's just as an idea, is that the civil society is asking all the companies to engage into the net zero economy, into the energy transition, but this means that we, as a bank, we have to work with clients and engaging them into this transition, energy transition. But civil society is not requesting the same on women. They should request the same thing, saying, why don't you ask your clients to go into parity or go into giving, stopping the glass ceilings, and then working on climate and climate vulnerability. So then exactly what we know and what we're going to learn with this panel through for the women. So there's something which is lacking. And so of course it has to be brought forward.
Thank you very much for the question. I think the fundamental interconnectedness between women and climate isn't yet understood, and it's not even understood by the people working in the environmental sector, which is a sector that I came out of, and that I would be sitting here talking at the Women's Forum and championing a gender equality campaign. A few years ago, if you told me I'd be doing that, I'd be laughing and saying, no. Social issues, we can deal with them once we fix the climate, once we fix our environmental emergency. Let's go back to that later. And it's only relatively recently that I have also understood that fundamental interconnectedness between our environmental, our social, and also, of course, our economic systems. I think we can't stress the importance of women enough to bring climate action, to accelerate climate action. I think we have to talk about money a lot more. Who gets the money? Is it going to women? We know that only 2 to 3% of VC funding goes to women-led teams. That is absolutely unacceptable, particularly now that we have to reinvent all our systems. We have to re-engineer all our operating systems because none of them are sustainable. Not our finance system, not our energy system, not our transport system, not our food system. So where's this innovation going to come from if we're not investing in the ideas of 50% of the world's population? So I congratulate the Women's Forum for addressing this. I congratulate the Women's Forum for bringing this agenda to the G7. And it's absolutely vital that we've also got the ministries of these countries, the gender equality ministries, working with the G7 and working also on climate, because the two are fundamentally connected.
Maybe let's look into this interconnection first and for another moment, because you just said it, and we all said it just in the conversation that we had before, that this is relatively new. And I think, Claudia, it was you who said, well, a few years ago I was told, isn't it a bit too much to link just everything to a gender question? Maybe if you want to give us a little idea of why there is reason to not tackle these things. One, the climate emergency first, and the social impact that it has second. But why it is, as Patricia Espinosa said in a United Nations speech of late, deeply interlinked, actually.
Yeah, well, I actually think Bianca hit it right on the head. We know that if we're going to solve this climate crisis, we have this kind of critical decade ahead, and we have to transform society in a way that we have never transformed society before. All sectors, transport, agriculture, buildings, cities. For those of you who live in cities, 2/3 of greenhouse gas emissions are produced either for the production and consumption of cities. So we have this huge transformation that we have to embrace. We can't just add on the social piece afterwards. We're in the middle of the transformation. It's the absolute right time to be holding those values forward: inclusion, gender equality, all of the things that we want to see manifest in that society that comes down the road. And I think it just has to be integrated.
Claudia, maybe you can tell us a little about about one dimension of the disproportionately negative impact that climate change has on women in the global south, because that is an area where you and your company work a lot with. How can it help fight climate change to help women financially, for example?
Yeah, first, it took, as you said, it took a little bit of time to understand that it's really there, a huge impact. And so then I had to figure it out technically, what does it mean? So probably as a scientist, you could have very better example, but just to understand is that if you are in the global south and in a patriarchal society, there's a woman who is going to fetch the water. There's a climate shock and the water is far away. So you're going to spend all the time to fetch the water, and you don't have any time anymore to get educated or to find or to do any other job. just giving examples, so technically is very basic. Or, well, the toilets are going to be far away. So if you're a woman and you have to go to a toilet, you need a toilet, and then it's going to be even more far away. Or this is for the global south. But then even in our countries, when you say that on the canicule, when there was a huge heat in France years ago, 13,000 people died, and 70% or something were women. And it's not just because women are living older. It was also because women are poorer. Women, even in our societies, because of these the fact that they did not work on full time because of the patriarchal society, they took care of the children, or because they did not work, or because of so many the reasons that we have been looking through this conference. In the end, well, they grow older, but they grow poorer, and so they don't have the money for protecting with the store, with the aircon, and so it's not a matter just of global south. And when it's global south, it's even harder. And then goes even further when you say, well, at a flooding, when there are the big flood, these are the women are the ones who are going to die before the other, because they're taking care of their family, because they're taking care of the older people. So they don't just fly away, go away. So, and the more I'm getting into this, and you are the masters, but then I am overwhelmed. And so I'm saying, well, what can we do? And so that's why we say, well, finance will be able to do something too, but I leave you the floor for more.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting, because sometimes for us it's really hard to imagine that we are in this climate emergency. I think we don't feel it, and why is that? Because we live in the global north, we're hugely privileged, but if you look at the global south, you see the climate emergency is happening right now, and people are dying right now, and our ecosystems are collapsing right now. And this is why I always want to invite everyone to just take a step back from what they're doing. They're working in tech, or whether they're working in fashion, or whatever it is. Let's just step back for a moment and think about what that means, because we have been relying on these ecosystems for everything. Our entire civilization depends on that. And on top of the ecosystems, we then have our human-made systems, our tech system, our finance system. But this ecosystem has provided us with clean water, with clean air, our oceans, our forests, and we have relied on them to provide us with the food and everything we need for life. And also we live geopolitically, we're jolly lucky, because we live in an area of the world where this clement weather has allowed us to go about our business and be very successful as a civilization, right? But if you lived in South Sudan and had heat wave and drought after year, you certainly would struggle to probably keep a business going. So we live in great comfort where we are today, but that is not the reality of all our sisters living in the South. 1.3 billion people live in poverty, 7% of those are women. They are responsible for 50 to 80% of the world's food production. And they're also responsible in their families for food, for water, and for the provision of energy materials. That reality is, whilst it's not hitting home here, as we are entering an era of disruption now going forward, and we can see that also with the conflict in the Ukraine. As we go forward, we are going to encounter more conflict. What is that going to do? That's going to make us focus on these necessities as well. That would be my prediction. And who do we need if we want to tackle those problems? We need new architects, we need new builders, and we need to have people in leadership right now who set up alternative structures to what we have today, and who are not afraid to speak the truth, because that's what's been missing as well. Let
me come to the leadership crisis actually in a minute. I just wanted to, you were nodding when the two of them were saying it is clear to everybody that this is a problem in developing countries in the South, and it's not yet as present to us. What's your argument if people say, but I can't feel climate change in our countries here?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I come from the US, in case it wasn't clear. And, you know, for a long time, we've had a challenge in the US where people just were not believing climate change was happening. I think there are some European countries who've had similar challenges from time to time.
Including this one, actually.
but it has been pretty pronounced in the past for us. Interesting now when you look at some of the research done, you know, just surveys of various folks across the US. Now, really, the question about whether climate change is happening is not so much, you know, in question. I think over 70% of people believe that climate change is happening. But when you ask them, are you feeling the effects of climate change? Less than 20% think that they're feeling that. And it's partially because we have our wealth to buffer us from the extreme effects of climate change. And I think that for me makes me think we need to start working on our own kind of individual action, thinking about spreading the word through our communities. Because often if you're only focused, and I don't want to say this, that you shouldn't work at the national or the global level. Obviously, we have to work on climate at every level. But one way to get people to focus on climate change is to say, how might this affect the places you love, the places you care about? And how can you expand your individual action, your choices for food, your choices for fashion, your choices for transportation, but also to think about expanding that and joining together at the community level to really amplify your own impact. So we just have to get to the point where we are allowing ourselves to feel that climate change is impacting us. And that's one way we can do it.
Let's talk about ways how we can tackle this issue. And you were starting already on this, Bianca. You're focusing on changing things at the top or from top down, actually, diagnosing a leadership crisis. I'm by no means actually suggesting that women should justify themselves why they want a say and a fair say and an equal say on things. But what is your assessment of what would change if more women were in charge, actually? What would change in terms of climate change?
Yeah,
what would be easier?
Yeah, maybe for those that don't know my background, so I'm one of the co-founders of an organization called She Changes Climate. I'm also the founder of a network called the Women of the Environment Network, and these are CEOs and founders of charities and foundations working on environmental issues, female philanthropists working on those issues, and influencers, broadly speaking. And 2 years ago, when the UK that was going to host the next climate conference announced their leadership team for COP26, there wasn't a single woman on it. Now, I said at the time, listen, forget COP. We are at COP26. So for over a quarter of a century, we've tried to figure things out. Emissions are still rising. Clearly, this format is hopeless anyway, whether or not there are women on it. But my colleagues assured me that this was a far too important conference, and I had to absolutely agree with them to let that go. Of course, if women weren't in leadership of that conference, that would completely skew the outcome. And why? Because if you aren't representing 50% of the world's experience and thought leadership, innovative potential in those conferences, and most particularly important, I think, at the negotiating table, if you don't have women slamming down the fist, quite frankly, occasionally, and saying, enough is enough, this is ridiculous. And by the way, what's the fossil fuel lobby doing here? They're the biggest lobby in this conference. Why on earth is that when we're trying to get rid of fossil fuels and trying to build a sustainable future? You know, if they are missing, well, we're not going to get the outcomes that we need. And this is not just for the participants of the conference or, you know, a few people working in politics. This is for the future of all of humanity. And what I always say, this is not for the success of women. If women are suffering, guess what? The men are going to suffer as well. They're not going to get the food. They're going to lose their homes as well. They're going to lose their mothers. They're going to lose their sisters and their daughters. And that is horrendous, horrendous. We all don't want that to happen. But what we're missing is decisive leadership, precisely now when we need it the most. And I really want to encourage every single person sitting in this room and everyone listening in on this conference to really make sure that you maximize on your own ambition as well today. Because This has to be a new founder era. We need new people to come in. We need people to develop maximum ambition. We don't want to die from a climate emergency. I certainly don't want to die from a climate emergency. We're perfectly capable of sorting this out. And every single person in this room is able to help with that and to turn things around.
Can I pick up on
Please,
that?
yeah.
Just love that, Bianca, because you mentioned innovation, right? There's some very interesting research on diversity and innovation. Because if you want to solve a complex problem, you want to bring diverse perspectives to the table. You don't want a bunch of guys from the same university sitting around the table with the same background and the same solutions coming up with the one single solution they're all going to agree on. You need people with diverse perspectives, diverse backgrounds, all sitting at a table thinking about the kind of innovative ways that we can solve this complex problem. And that means bringing women to the table. That means bringing people from the global south. It also means bringing youth to the table. Thank you, all of you who are actually pushing climate action more than anyone in my generation ever did, but we're going to rise up. It just means everyone coming to the table and working as hard as you can from your own, and having the courage to speak up, even when the system is maybe stacked against you, and raising that hand in the back that says, well, have you thought about this? Because that's what we need to solve this problem.
Cool. Isn't you were a climate negotiator in the past? Maybe you can tell us how that could even happen. I mean, when you discovered that there was no single woman in the delegation leadership, you must have thought that's it's by mistake, or somebody has just forgotten, or it's easy to fix. But it was not so easy to fix in the end, it turned out. But how could it happen? It's not your country, I know, but you may be freer to talk about this one.
So your question is, how can you get more women in leadership?
Well, I was just baffled by the mere fact that nobody thought of that. Is that an experience that you made in the past?
It's our bias. Sorry. It's just the bias. I mean, we talked about this earlier, it's ridiculous. And I think it would be so ridiculous if we tripped up over our bias. If we couldn't fix this issue we've got right now because of our bias, if this is the end of our civilization, just because of our bias, I mean, that would be ridiculous, right?
Yeah, I think so. I'll just share from a science perspective, because yes, I was a climate negotiator, but now I'm one of the first women in the leadership of IPCC. And we'll be going into our elections in the next year or so. So please make sure you tee up your women, because we need a woman to lead the organization next round. But as we kind of put together our periodic assessment reports of the state of the climate, which is what we do in IPCC, every 7 years or so, we gather authors from across the world to tell us what they know about climate. We ask countries for their nominees for authors. Right there is a potential limiting factor. If you don't have countries nominating women authors, the pool that you get to choose from is, already limited. So this round, we had about 30% of our authors were women, which is a vast improvement over the 80s when we had 3%. But, so you can just see, there was an earlier conversation about, the need for attacking the structures that constrain. That's a perfect example of the ways we have to do that.
Claudia, please.
Maybe I can also talk about this innovation that we are looking for. And then, well, I have my bias, which is in finance. We need innovation too. And maybe there's not enough gender-oriented finance. Although there was, on the very beginning, the social bonds and the green bonds had a very strong gender bias, but which was even not enough. So they were just companies saying, oh, I'm going just to put a benchmark of minimum X% of women on the board, and this is enough. And so it was just a way to hiding the true figures. So now we need to go into a true gender-oriented finance. And it could go like for microfinance, in our case, we finance the microfinance institutions. And so more banks could do this. So microfinance institutions are really gender-oriented. Well, they were created mainly through the model of Professor Yunus. And so by being gender-oriented, they really give empowerment to the woman. On our side, we do 350 million of financing to microfinance. And of course, it's a lot, but it's even not enough, because then we cannot cover the full world. Then we need social innovation in finance through, for instance, the mechanics of social impact bonds. And for instance, we have been working and we have financing a development impact bond in Ethiopia, which is focusing on education to women through the fact that we understand that in some countries, women are not educated, or they drop out from school because of menstrual hygiene, because of lack of facilities of menstrual hygiene. They drop off school 1 week a month. And can you imagine how long are you going to stay in school if you can't attend as much? So we've been working with CARE International, with AFD, Agence Française de Développement, and we are the sole investor of this 3 million development impact bond. But of course, it's not enough. So then we're trying to see what are the kind of finance can we do. And so we've been working on the One Planet Fellowship through the foundation BNP Paribas, and which is about finding researchers from the Global South, and 50-50, they need to be women. They need simply to be women, because the researcher will know what is most fitting their needs and what has to be done. So we are funding with the 20 million donation, this One Planet Fellowship, and now we are looking for the third cohort of researchers. But still, of course, never is enough. So what else can be done? And then we're open to all the possible ideas.
That fits into what you just said before with the people nominating researchers and authors. Actually, I have one more question in this round here for this group before I would like to invite you to ask your question. So while we discuss the last question here for this round, maybe you come up with yours, and then after a Q&A session with you, we bring it back to the stage here. You all agree mostly on the things that we have been discussing. We all agree, the audience seems to agree. How big is the risk, or what can be done? That's probably the better question, to avoid the risk that we preach to the choir and talk among ourselves in a bubble that is aware of these questions, and what's the best chance to get out of this bubble and get as many people as possible involved into this debate. Maybe you start, Bianca, as you have as a campaigner probably a lot of experience with exactly that.
Yeah, I think so important it's important to say we're saving the environment, not for the environment's sake, but actually for the people's sake. So it's people and planet that has to be our goal, our absolutely confirmed goal. We have to have people's interest in mind. Otherwise, people won't want to come on board to save the environment if they think, what's it got to do with me? I live in the city. I quite frankly don't care if the countryside gets flooded, for example. And I think we need to talk about 50-50 vision. This is what we are campaigning for at Changes Climate. We want men and women to work alongside each other. I always compare it to sailing. You wouldn't go sailing with one eye firmly patched up, particularly if you know that choppy waters lie ahead. I think Sophie Lambin maybe compared it to having one arm tied to the back. That's another good analogy. You wouldn't want to sail the world with one eye shut or one arm behind your back. So it's time to release that eye so that we have full vision of what is going on around us, male vision, female vision, and that we work together on tackling these issues very decisively within the next 1 to 3 years. We don't have till 2050. That's a lovely idea, but climate scientists are speaking about a state of permanent climate chaos by 2030. We have about 3 years to sort this out. We need to bring emissions not only down, we have to regenerate our planet in that time and beyond. So we need all hands on board. And it'll be a great deal of fun. It'll be much more fun if men and women work together on this. And I want to invite everybody to come and join us.
I think that needs no You look like there's not much more to add to.
Well, I totally agree that we have to focus on people. I think part of the challenge, and I've been working on climate for 25 years. And even for me, I will just confess, in the early years, when we're talking about an eventual 2 degrees of warming and invisible gases, you feel like you can wait. What's the urgency? This is something invisible and it's not even here. But now the science is just incredibly urgent, and it's woken up even people like me who should have been awake a long time ago, to say, oh yeah, this is about now, this is about people I care about and about places that I care about. So anyway, that's all I would add to that.
There's one very important thing. It's just to bring home what's really happening. So I talked about that interconnectedness between our environmental, social, and economic systems. And nothing has brought that more to our attention, I would say, than this pandemic we've just had, right? And the gender gap has increased from 100 years to 136 years because of COVID. So can you imagine what's going to happen if we have permanent disruption by absolutely out of control weather?
So is the point that it will take us 136 years to reach gender parity?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
If we think it's going to happen organically, well, you can all deduct it's not going to happen organically. We have to do something far more ambitious, and we just have to push in now.
I think that's a perfect launching pad for questions from the audience. Here's a microphone and here's a question. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Clara, one of the youth ambassadors and working at Biopharmaceuticals. First of all, I want to thank you for this very inspirational talk. I think we all could get a lot of it. And I do have one question to you, Bianca. You talked about decisive leadership and also to maximizing on our own ambition. So I would like to know today, when we all walk out of this room, what should be the very first thing that we do in order to achieve climate action?
While Bianca answers the question, there's the next question up here. Maybe you can walk up there already. So we
grab the microphone is all I can say. Just to put this into relation, I don't like public speaking. You won't believe it, but I'm actually a shy person. I don't like speaking publicly. I'd rather be at home. But I realized this is too important. You know, I've got to get out there and speak about this all day long, actually. And this is the first step we've got to do. What is really important is also to build your networks. Just connect to anybody. And quite frankly, it doesn't matter whether you know them. You're going to get to know them and they're going to get to know you. As women in particular, we have to reach out and build these worldwide networks. Well, at the moment, LinkedIn is a fantastic medium, for example. Use social media. Just make use of technology to get out there and connect also to your local community, of course, and beyond technology is also what I would suggest. And so forget your shyness if you feel in any way shy or held back by whatever. Get out there, connect to people, and then take action. So we're beyond talking right now. You know, we shouldn't be talking. We should be just taking decisive action. And I want to see action from all of you. I want to hear from you about what organizations you founded, what businesses you started, how you got that job in politics or in government. I want to hear from you, you know, as soon as possible. Connect to me on LinkedIn. But that is what we've got to do. Take action. Don't wait. If you think someone else is going to do it, I can tell you already, they're not going to do it. Don't wait for anybody else. That's what I would say.
Thank you. Please, go ahead.
Thank you very much for your panel. My name is Grace Forrest and I'm the co-founder and director of Walk Free, which is an international human rights group focused on the eradication of modern slavery in all its forms. And I have a question around how we truly strengthen inclusive climate action around the supply chains of a green transition. Because as you said, Bianca, this is about people and planet, but right now a green transition will be very much built on forced labour. And in the last 18 months, living through compounding crisis, I've heard many leaders say, even at COP26, oh, well, we can't really do anything about that, even though we absolutely can, especially the world's most powerful nations, especially the G7.
Get more women into leadership. I think the rest will take care of itself. This is a very simplified answer, I know. By the way, Inge Ralph has told me to pass on greetings to you, so I'm delighted I'm meeting you at least this way. This is another fabulous woman working on environmental issues. But I think if we get women into leadership, in politics, in corporations, in civil society, where they are mostly represented, I think the rest will fall into place. That is my only hope, by the way. I'm very pessimistic, but this is my hope.
But this green transition is going to happen before that does. There's not a woman leading a G7 nation, so I'm afraid we're going to have another answer to that, or the entire new economy will be once again built on modern slavery.
We've got to demand it from the men that are in power.
Yes.
Yeah.
Claudia, you had
Very clearly and loudly.
And maybe another part of the solution is asking companies to work on their environmental social governance, but to work seriously on those ratings, taking seriously the extra financial ratings, and then really working there to enhance them. Because those ratings, when done seriously, they are terribly going very, very deeply, and they are asking to check all the supply chain and to check deeper, and then to see the supply of the suppliers, and then going on that. I think this is the thing that can be checked as a consumer and as another businesswoman or businessman. And then after that, then we can take consequences. We're not going to want to finance that company anymore. And we can decide that. So on our side, we have decided to screen through ESG strict ratings all the largest clients of the group. And then it's going to be on the smallest clients, and then it's going to be deeper and deeper. So it's a way to act, and then as a person, as a consumer, as a person who buys, I think we can also check before buying everything. Are they respecting all those criteria?
And if I'll just say, I don't have a solution, but I really appreciate your bringing our attention to that issue, because, with a rapid transition, often I think we would fall into, let's just do it quicker in the old way, instead of actually taking the time to think about the ways we've been exploiting people improperly and changing while we're transforming.
I also wanted to mention something I forgot. Lawsuits, very effective campaigning tool, very effective to bring about change. Amazing. Yeah, don't forget that.
I think we'd have time for one more question if there is one more question. Oh yes, please, sorry. I couldn't see that. But.
That's okay. Hi, I'm Annette Young, the host of the 51%, a women's show in France 24 in English. Virginie Hertz, who's emceeing, is my work sister and presents the French version of the program. The reason I want to ask you, perhaps mainly to you, Bianca, but interested to hear your perspectives from the other panelists as well. As I sat in my Paris apartment last week, 3 days in a row, closing the curtains and the blinds because of the extraordinary heat we're experiencing. And as an Australian from the town of Adelaide, which, believe me, I grew up experiencing 40-degree heat, without air conditioning, in reference to what you were saying earlier about Claudia, it just is not people in the global south who are going to experience extraordinary disruption. It's right across the world. We have a COP meeting coming up in Egypt in November. I want to know what can be done, can anything be done to improve gender representation in those talks? Again, I'm interested in what, either of you have to say about this.
Who wants to start?
Should I just dive in? Well, I think that's incredibly important to discuss and to work on right now for all of us to address at the very least, right? She Changes Climate is solidly focused on this, so we are speaking to the presidency, but the leadership team of the coming COP, you will struggle to find out who that is because there's not even a website covering this. My local village shop in Sussex has a website, but the most important climate conference coming up this year, hosted by Egypt, doesn't have a website outlining who's on the team. So, but we know that there is a male president, there's a male high-level champion. There hasn't been a female high-level champion for a COP in 5 years, by the way, if anyone who's interested. And the 2 lead negotiators are men as well. And the only woman on that team is a coordinator and envoy. So what does it tell us? Once again, although we have run a whole campaign about the lack of women in leadership at COPs since COP26. Once again, women have been missed out for some reason we don't totally understand, and it has to do with bias. we can't let that go ahead. Why is that? Because this conference is simply too important for all our future, for our children's future. This is about life and death now. We've got to get women into leadership. So what you can do in your various countries where you have a voice as a citizen, as a voter, as a leader of business, you can speak to your government and ask them what they are doing about that. Who are they going to send to this conference? Do they have a gender balanced team? Are they going to stand up for women's rights at this conference? Do they want to be one of those champions? Is the Ministry of Gender Equality, so far as your country has such a thing, because many countries don't, standing up for this and working with the climate ministry on this? And the NDCs, which are the nationally determined contributions, which are the sort of ambitious targets that countries set themselves for these climate conferences, do they have all these gender targets in there as well? And when we're talking about finance, most importantly, is 50% of that finance going to go to women? That is what we can do on our side.
Can I just quickly add?
Vote for women, obviously, retweet women, quote women and hire women, and also make sure that when you're either investing in companies or working for a company, that those companies' boards have 50% women on them. Very, very important.
Lots of tips. Please go ahead.
Just very quickly.
Yeah.
So the COP in Egypt is focused on adaptation, and it's an African COP. So that's an opportunity really to get women into the conversation. And I love the work that Bianca's doing for the negotiators. When you go to a COP, the negotiations is a small nucleus of the meeting. The rest is all the side events, all the press, all the whole networking. We have an opportunity to get people into that conference and to be part of the larger conversation that will just already by nature, because it's adaptation in Africa, be an opportunity and an invitation to women.
And adaptation and resiliency. So they're also having a focus afterward in resiliency done by UNFCCC. And we would like to work on that, because we have to adapt, and this is going again to be done by women, and then the most resilient have to be the women, otherwise there's no future after it. And about, and I fully agree with you, Bianca, we really need a finance that focuses on women. And so it means also trying to fund more women-led businesses, trying to find the women-led businesses and bring them forward, because there are not many. And it seems also that it was not normal to invest into women-led businesses, because the VCs, the venture capital, they did not trust that. So we really have to change the world from inside and teach single step. And then whenever we do sustainability linked loans, the sustainability link has to tackle the women's side. And so there's no single point in which we don't have this woman focus. We have to really have it from the very beginning to the end.
There were a lot of good. We have to wrap up slowly. I see that he's the 1 minute sign in his hand already. He didn't show it to me yet, but I'm sure it will come in a second. I'm wrapping it up slowly. You had a lot of very good tips to this audience here and to the women. You will forgive me the selfishness to ask, what can men do in a short answer of all of you, please?
So much. Listen to women. Start with that. Give them the forum. Give them the microphone. It's difficult to step back from power. No one wants to share power willingly, but we have to think about new forms of leadership. To expect just one person at the top to take all the decisions is kind of unfair to the person at the top. It's too much responsibility. And we need to think of new forms. What are these new forms of leadership bringing? What's distributed leadership got to give us, or shared leadership, right? And how can we share leadership with more people, including starting with women? This is what men really should start discussing now, is hang on, is this old leadership model working? Well, clearly not. So what new forms of leadership should we entertain to make things better?
Thank you. two more.
Very
Sure.
About maybe subscribing all these never without her, one he for she, subscribing and starting to learn and understanding each single point, because it's a big story behind, and we have all our bias. But then when it's understood, then the men were going to lead for the women as leaders.
I'll just repeat what I said earlier. If you're interested in having a robust solution, you want diversity helping you to think that through. So even if it's men thinking in their own self-interest, having women at the table is actually going to help the collective good.
I have to thank you for this discussion and the debate. And I have three takeaways, three things that I've learned from the debate with you. One is that we all have a bias, and it's ridiculous to die of that bias, so let's get rid of it. The second one is actually was very interesting what you said, Claudia, that there is a rising awareness and scrutiny also in the private sector, that this is not normal and this is not how it's supposed to be. And from Yuko, I've heard probably an application to lead the IPCC next year, which is big news, I would say, and I hope. So thanks very much for that discussion and debate, and thank you for having us here and for your questions and your interest and engagement, and all the best for the rest of the conference.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Florian. Thank you very much. Also wenn